and welcome back to another edition of the SBK Betting Podcast. It's Morebattle Hurdle this weekend at Kelso, a very prestigious meeting for the Kelso venue, and there's plenty of racing in and around. We've got the likes of Newbury, Doncaster, as well as all-weather action at Lingfield as well. So before we get into our race that we're going to focus on, which is the Morebattle Hurdle, we need to take a moment to reflect on what happened last weekend, because Ross Millar, you were bang on right. Your nap selection, Kitty's Light, a favourite, a dear favourite of, I think, many racegoers at this stage. We've been following the exploits of Kitty's Light and Christian Williams for a few seasons now, and this horse, who is only pint size, but my God, he's got the heart of a lion, and recorded what must be one of his performances of his career to win the Ida Chase in the most unusual fashion. But it is just the way Kitty's Light does it, isn't it, Ross? You must have been, again, after the success of Shishkin and your case for him, really thrilled to see him perform the way he did.
Yeah, I was. I mean, I got a going report from up at Newcastle early on the Saturday morning, and I must admit I was not exactly thrilled, because it sounded like a lot of water had gone down. The poor clerk of the course up there has had a fairly tough winter. She had a frozen off all-weather meeting, and then there was a few unhappy people about the amount of grass cover. So it sounds like she put plenty of water down, which is great, but I was working on the basis that the ground was going to be quick enough for Kitty's Light, because I think that's what he acts best on. So I think you can mark that run up, because I don't think it was his conditions. I saw a lot of people say that he didn't jump very well, and he certainly didn't jump great down the back last time. But I think actually, when you look at his jumping form in general, he's not the best jumper of fence, and I thought actually it was one of his better rounds of jumping, particularly up the home straight. Every time Jack Tudor asked him to come, he came. Yeah, I think he's a smart horse. He's had a little hike in the weights, but Christian did it last year with Win My Wings, won the Ida, and then went on and won the Scottish National. And I'm on at 16-1 for the Scottish National, and I think that's where he'll head. And I think if he gets good ground there, it'll be a good one to beat him.
Yeah, fabulous for Christian Williams to have struck up what has been a brilliant last few weeks after what's been quite a torrid season early on in the campaign. But Kitty's Light, as you say, isn't the most natural fluent of chasers. Shouldn't be. He's bred to be running on the flat, being by Nathaniel. But I just believe has been such an overachiever for what they spent on him, and is a real credit to that yard and all their team. So well done for Kitty's Light. And another nap gone in, bang on the money. TC Lord North, impressive in the Winter Derby, and could be said far more impressive than last year. Puts him bang on for another tilt in Meydan on Dubai World Cup night. What do you think of that performance?
It's good, but at the same time, it was kind of what I was expecting. I was at Kempton on Saturday watching the jumps action, but I was stood in the bookmaker section just to watch this race at Lingfield, and I was saying to my friend at the time that Lord North just cannot lose this race. And once he jumped out and Harrovian went to the front and Lord North was in that perfect box seat in second, later moved back into fourth, but on the outside, like, he just couldn't lose that race, especially given he had such a huge amount in hand on official ratings. I think it was expected. I think he'll improve for the effort. I'm pretty sure he wasn't 100% ready, but he's just a really good horse, a horse that's capable of performing in Group 1 races, and that wasn't a Group 1. He was a short price, but sometimes bankers can be short prices.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, a good thing, and you don't go broke making a profit, as I always say. And well, we'll hope to find a couple more from our nap selections a little later, especially if you've got anything, again, from the all-weather. A reminder that we recorded a novice hurdles preview podcast for the Cheltenham Festival last week. It's going down great. Looking forward to seeing how some of those materialise. I know that, Ross, there was one eye on the action at Kempton for a couple of your selections. What was your making, just quickly, of what we saw in the Adonis, and also, name escapes me, our other novice race at Kempton on the weekend?
Well, I thought in the Adonis, I think what we learned is that it is very, very short odds that the Triumph Hurdle heads to Ireland. I just think it showed that the UK are very, very short of top class horses. And then I suppose the other highlight at Kempton was just the sort of handicap chase. Captain Ord couldn't land the double, but I thought Solo was really impressive off the front. at Kempton, and Frank's a few lines of form for the graded novice chases going into Cheltenham.
Yeah, certainly does. The Adonis and the Dovecot, that's what it was. And actually quite interesting form lines with the winner of the Dovecot and the Morebattle Hurdle, especially from a Betfair Hurdle perspective. And this is the race that we're going to focus on this afternoon and looking ahead for Saturday at 1:50 at Kelso. The story of this race is Mctigue. He'll head the betting at 3-1 for the very shrewd Emmet Mullins operation. The colours of Mctigue are Paul Byrne, sported by the Shunter to win this race a few years ago when he went from this to Cheltenham to claim that £100,000 bonus. But Mctigue, a different kind of horse, 98 rated on the flat. He's already a two-time winner over jumps. Is he well handicapped? We don't really know what we've got here. He was well held by Lossiemouth at Christmas. How strong is that form? He won in Auteuil, beating St. Donat, who went on to become the champion 3R hurdler in France. That is his profile. How good he is, we will find out at Kelso on Saturday. It is a race that doesn't just solely revolve around him. We've also got Colonel Mustard, who heads the weights, who ultimately you could argue has got the best form on the table. And then you've got a plethora of UK trained horses, including the unexposed in the UK, at least, Le de Sud for Harry and Dan Skelton. And then, as I mentioned, the Betfair Hurdle form, Teddy Blue, who was third in the race, is in here. We've also got Titanic, who is back in the field as well. And you've got last year's winner, Cormier. This all makes up for quite a nice race. Tom, I'll start with you, especially from a perspective of Mctigue. What do you think of him and what he's done so far? Is he well handicapped? Is this just another Emmet Mullins special? What do you make of his chances?
It's really difficult to know, isn't it? I mean, he's rated 142, but at the same time, he's been running in much better races than this in Grade 1 company. He hasn't had many starts over hurdles, but as you said, this is Emmet Mullins. We've seen him come over to Britain numerous times in the last couple of years and proved just ultra successful with similar kind of horses. You mentioned the Shunter there, and it looks like he's willing to have a real big day at Kelso on Saturday. I don't know, he's been meeting a combined 111 lengths on his last two starts, albeit in better races as I've touched on. And, you know, you're going against inferior opposition here, but at the same time, he tops the market. So you've got to take a little shot there. The risk-free reward isn't actually that great. You know, you're not getting 10-1 about this horse, who could be a potential blot. You're getting 3-1, 4-1 about a potential blot, which just isn't really ideal for me. There are a couple of others in here that are interesting. You know, Le de Sud, who you touched on there, clearly very well handicapped horse. But his last two efforts for Dan Skelton, I just don't think he's finished his races off very well. And that would put me off him a little bit. I think I tipped him actually last time when he got beat and he travelled lovely, or I backed him anyway, because I was there at Kempton when he ran. So he's not for me. There are a couple of others in here. Cormier, and I did what I normally do before we go into podcasts like this and go back to check what we all tipped last year in the race, how we previewed it, etc. And I was fortunate enough to actually see myself tip Cormier. I don't remember that at 8-1. I also did tip Espoir de Rome earlier on the card and he lost. So, you know, that's neither here nor there. But Cormier is back to try and retain his crown. He's definitely a player as he reverts to hurdling from chasing. But I watched the replay of him last time out and his unseat was not pleasant to watch. He completely breasted the fence. And, you know, that can leave scars on a horse, not necessarily physically, albeit it can, but mentally. And I know he's going back to the smaller obstacles, but as we all know, regular viewers of this podcast will know that it's a regular rule of mine that I don't back a horse that failed to complete last time out due to jumping errors. So had to put a line through him this year. And that kind of left me with a horse called Benson. Now, I don't love this selection, I have to say. I'm not going to come in here with my Lord North confidence. He's going to be an each-way player at a double-figure price. But the reason for putting him up is that he looked completely different last time up than we saw a couple of years ago or even last year for Richard Newland. This horse raced really lazily out the back of handicap hurdles. He was always sent off reasonably short price because everyone knows he's got lots of ability. But he just never got into a rhythm. He was pushed along in the early stages and then would stay on late and pick up the pieces and go down as an eye catcher. But last time out, Ryan Mania went to the front on Benson. I think that was the key to seeing a notable amount of improvement from this horse. He travelled so much better through his race. He got into a nice rhythm and he kicked clear, was unextended close to home because he was just able to find that rhythm and get into his stride and not waste valuable energy being bustled along out the back early on. Now, if Romania can get to the front again, and I understand this is a shorter distance, he has been running over 2.5 miles, so maybe that's not going to happen. And if it doesn't, then you probably put a line through Benson. But if he can get to the front again, maybe Benson can build on that effort last time up and go very close at a decent price. So, despite fearing the favourite, trained by Emmet Mullins, despite fearing Cormier coming back and reclaiming his crown, I'm going to go with Benson each way, Jess.
Yeah, so TC, we can give you at the moment for Benson 14-1, which is a nice price, as you say, each way value there. And as you mentioned, Cormier £2 higher, switches back to hurdles after this underwhelming chasing season. I did like Benson. I was looking through this race and looking at the pace that there was on, and I thought there was a lot of it around. Teddy Blue likes to go forward. We can see he's quite a free-going sort. And then right at the bottom, There Is No Doubt also likes to go forward. And I've seen this race time and time again. It's actually set up quite nicely for closes. Would that be something that would concern you?
Yes, it would. As I say, I think the main case for backing Benson or tipping Benson is the fact that he could get to the front and perform as he did last time out. And if he is mid-div or towards the back of the pack early on, because there is so much speed in this race, then that would be a concern, because we've seen in the past that this horse can just drop the bridle. He just doesn't really seem interested when he's out the back. His jumping goes to pieces. However, saying all that, and I do sound like I'm very down on him if that's the case, and maybe I am, but at the same time, we haven't seen him race in that kind of style for his new connection. So maybe it was actually the switch of yards which saw the catalyst of improvement. Maybe he's a better horse in himself nowadays. Maybe he actually will race better in mid-div than he used to. But at the same time, it would provide a bit of a question mark. I would like to see him go to the front.
Yeah, he's got the cheap pieces back on last time out, which isn't a new thing. They tried them before, but I think reapplying them after a bit of a hiatus without them is definitely perked up his interest. I just wonder if he might just get spit the dummy out if he gets hassled for the lead early on. So that's always a concern. That was what my thought was when I made my selection. Ross, we'll get your thoughts again. Let's go back to Mctigue, because as mentioned, this is a horse that if it kind of feel like if it was trained by anyone else obviously you got the Irish element. If it was trained by any Irish trainer, would be interested. But is it just an Emmet Mullins factor? I mean, he was absolutely annihilated by Lossiemouth last time. You've got to go back to that victory against St. Donats. Obviously, that was impressive in context to what kind of horse St. Donats is. But he's really not showed a huge amount to warrant all this hype. And the fact that, he's been hyped up £6 by the UK handicapper for Cheltenham, 3-1 favourite for something like this. I just feel like, you might be able to, but I think I need a really, really dominant case for this horse.
Well, I'll try then, Jess, because I absolutely understand where you're coming from. And I said something similar about Filey Bay for the Betfair Hurdle, that if you were backing that, you were backing the brilliance of Emmet Mullins, because there was no form line whatsoever to entitle that horse to be favourite. And I think it's true to a degree with this horse. I thought he was pretty impressive at Sedgefield. He sort of cantered around, quickened away. Okay, it wasn't much of a race, but I liked how he hurdled for a first-time hurdle performance. The win in Auteuil was impressive, and St. Donats, who was runner-up, is a smart horse, well-regarded over here in France. That was over 2 mile 2 on heavy ground. Kelso takes a fair bit of getting. This is a race that will suit strong stayers. So I think he ticks that box, and he did stay a mile 6 on the flat. St. Donats beat him next time at Auteuil, but I think you can probably put a line through that run. I just don't think he gave his running. And then at Leopardstown, you have to bear in mind to run in the open handicaps at Cheltenham this year, horses need a 4th run, the statement clause, shall we call it. If ever I've seen a horse have a bob around run in my life, Mctigue had one at Leopardstown. He jumped one a little bit slow down the back, and even from the camera angle that you watch from the stands at Leopardstown, you could see the smile on the jockey's face, as it meant that he could lose another few lengths and get shuffled further back into the field. I think that was a bob around run. I don't think you can take that in any way, shape or form at face value. He's effectively a nigh on 100 rated flat horse, effectively running off 132 because he gets his weight for age allowance here of £10. I can just see it all adding up. He stays well. all his best form on the flat was on better ground, despite the fact that his standout piece of hurdling form's come on heavy ground. He'll definitely stay. The Yard have landed this £100,000 bonus 2 years ago with the Shunter. And then when you look at the entries this horse has at Cheltenham, it's the Boodles, which is okay in his own age group over 2 mile, but then everything else is the Coral and the Pike. He doesn't hold an entry in the county, which to me suggests they think he's a strong stayer at the trip. I was interested in Colonel Mustard. I think you need to give him a shout. I think he has got the single best piece of hurdling form in the field. That third place in the county hurdle last year behind Stateman and First Street, who have gone on, but gets a really good £3 claimer in Kieran Buckley. He's gone over to ride for Gavin Cromwell this year and is just taking his form to another level. But I just think watching that county back, Colonel Mustard was weakening up the hill. I think you need to see the 2 miles out strongly here. I think Mctigue will do that. Yes, there's a bit of guesswork, but I think Emmet Mullins is proving that he can do things that normal trainers don't really think of, let alone do. So much as it goes against my normal MO, I do think he's got a great profile for this.
Okay, so in that respect, you mentioned this race at Leopardstown where he just had a pop around, and without wanting to get into too many rules and regulations, especially it's quite a contentious subject of handicapping horses at this stage. Do you think that is if that's what they were trying to do, is just trying to basically get him in a nice handicap mark? Do you think 142 really is?
I'm not sure at 142, but he's effectively off 132 because of his weight for age allowance in this race, the £10 the 4-year-olds get. So I think 132 is a really nice mark. Yeah, I would work on a basis that if a horse takes the hurdling, you can add around 35 to 45 to their flat form to get their hurdle mark. He was 98 at his best on the flat, so even my poor GCSE maths tells me that I think he's nicely handicapped off 132 effectively.
Yeah, fine. Fair point. Very fair point, considering he's a 4-year-old. Gonna have to see it to believe it. I think that's even and might be a disadvantage. He's a 4-year-old. The lack of experience there, where you've got horses that, and I like these big busting handicaps that some, it makes men of them, because most of them have done this, been there, done it, got the t-shirt a little bit. Whereas I have to see it with Mctigue, especially as a 3-1 favourite. It just seems quite short to me for a horse that I don't really know a huge amount about, but I have an enormous amount of respect for Emmet Mullins, and have enormous amount of respect for Ross Millar, he's landing his naps week after week. So you're either with Ross, with Tom, or you're with my perspective, which is, as Ross mentioned, Colonel Mustard definitely has the strongest form in this race. No doubt about it. Last time he was seen, yes, it was over fences, but he was beaten 19 lengths by El Fabiolo. We know what El Fabiolo's gone on and done. That's not to be disregarded at all. He's not had the ideal season over fences. He's probably not been that natural, but they were, fair enough to try that route. He switches back to hurdles, and as Ross has said, that form in the county hurdle, third to Stateman, that's probably one of the strongest races that we saw last season. So with that in mind, yes, he's got top weight. He does get £3 with Kieran Buckley's claim. I just think his form stands head and shoulders above the rest, and I think he could be just too good and battle hardened for a race like this. And I do believe the pace of this race might set up quite well for him. Maybe Ross might be quite right. Maybe he might not just see it out. We'll see. But I'm willing to take a bit of a risk, because I think he's just that slightly better price at this stage, around 5-1. I'm just going to throw in also Tritonic. I think he's an interesting horse. He's definitely got plenty of talent. We've seen that. We saw him win the big handicap at Ascot at Christmas time a couple of years ago. He's gone a tumbling mark, but I don't think he ran badly in the Betfair Hurdle, where they fitted cheap pieces for him. And I think he was 8th, or was he 9th? He was 8th. it wasn't a bad run after it was only his second run of the year over hurdles. And I just think that the horse just might be coming down to more of a competitive mark. Would have helped him even having a claimer on board, but Adrian Heskin, as always, is on board. So I'm not against him at 14-1. That's an each way play. But that's the Morebattle Hurdle. Can Emmet Mullins do it again? Can Mctigue go from this on to, as Ross was saying, he's got a flurry of entries. We'll see where he goes to after this. They might not even consider a race at Cheltenham, but this is where we'll find out more about Mctigue. So he's the selection of Ross at 3-1. Tom's gone for Benson at 14-1, and I am interested in Colonel Mustard and a bit of Tritonic. So that's our feature race. We're going to go into our naps and our next best, and I think can't split you two this week after a successful weekend last weekend. Maybe because TC's got a big smile on his face. I'm interested to know what he's got up his sleeve. So you go for it.
Yeah, I do want to preface these selections by saying that last week I was confident with my picks. This week, less so. I think it's really difficult racing. And if I am to have any bets on the UK action on Saturday, I will be having bets on the US, by the way, because Gulfstream is incredible. But if I'm going to have any bets on the UK action, it will be the Napa Next Best. Though I'm not going there all gung-ho thinking these two are 100% certs like last week with the Nap. The Nap, however, is iconic moment in the 306 at Lingfield. Now, should have been a ring, and Alpha Capture will probably head the market in here, and both have fantastic claims on ratings. They ran in a Southall conditions race last time out, finished first and second respectively. Should have been a ring 1, Alpha Capture was second. I actually prefer Alpha Capture out of those two coming into this race. I think he was a little bit undercooked going into Southall. He'll definitely come on for the effort. However, iconic moment, this horse is under the radar, and I think he's got the talent and ability to beat Should Have Been a Ring and Alpha Capture. He's trained by James Tate, who I think actually is the most underrated trainer in the flat sphere right now. Since August 1st, so we're talking 7 months, since then he's had a strike rate of 29%. That is phenomenal, especially given the kind of races he runs his horses in. He doesn't have too many handicappers, but he has lots of horses in novice events. He goes to listed races, group races, some top-end handicaps as well. Just a really good strike rate. An iconic moment is 2 from 2 in his career. This horse has a ridiculously high ceiling. We don't know where it is just yet. And Should Have Been a Ring and Alpha Capture, we kind of know a listed level at best. Iconic moment could be a group horse. Last time out at Chelmsford, I was really impressed with how he quickened up coming off the home bend. It looked like the James Fanshawe trainee who eventually finished second that day was going to win, going wide around the outside. But iconic moment just kicked up the inside and went clear and won very decisively. I think he's a horse that's going to be rated 110 in time, and he should, hopefully with the addition of Ross Orion on board, take all the beating in the 306 at Lingfield. And the next best goes at Newbury. Now, this horse I was planning on giving as an each-way selection when there were 16 runners in the initial 48-hour decks. Before the 48-hour decks. But unfortunately, this race is really cut up, and now there's only 7 runners, so it is a win selection. And that is Forget the Way, 4 o'clock at Newbury. Poncho and Mateta at the top of the race card. They're probably going to take all the money for leading connections, got good recent form. They're the here and now horses. And Forget the Way is arguably the horse for the future. But last time out, I thought he ran with great credit. He was travelling in behind the speed. The leaders quickened, and he just looked a little bit outpaced. He looked flat-footed over the second last hurdle. But he stayed on so well in the closing stages behind a useful horse who reopposes called Dom Perry. And I think he can reverse the form here with that runner trained by Huey Morrison. He's probably going to be a 2.5 miler in time. He's probably going to need more races to be seen at his best. But maybe Forget the Way at a decent price could be one to follow in the 4 o'clock at Newbury.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks for that, TC. For what it's worth, iconic moment. I was there at Chelmsford when he won back in November, and I got the opportunity to interview James Tate afterwards, and he said the plan from that moment was always going to be this Spring Cup on Saturday. So it's been a long waiting game to get him out again. And good, and I'm sure you know that there's been 2 winners come from the race since. Not a huge amount of form, but I know Garrett Painter won the other day, and even the horse right down at the bottom, Synodon of Richard Hughes, frank that form. So I'm with you with that horse. I'm really looking forward to seeing him. So thanks for that. And hopefully that will give you a bit of more confidence for those selections. Right, Tom, let's hope that we can follow on from last week. And Ross, let's hope you can do the same as well.
Let's hope so. The Nap is in the 130 at Doncaster. The Dan Skelton train, Calico, who I felt a bit sorry for after his effort at Warwick, because he finished second to John Bond, only beaten 5.5 lengths. And John Bond clearly didn't give his running. He was big in the paddock. I'm not sure he loved the slightly quicker ground, but poor old Calico, when people are sort of talking down John Bond's performance, you'd have thought Calico was sort of some 80 rated seller. He's a decent horse in his own right. I thought he jumped brilliantly around Warwick, which is a track that puts a premium on jumping. Got a pound rise for that, and I don't think that's gonna harm his chances here. His previous run was at Southwell. He won there, and he beat a horse called Out on the Tear. It's a horse I know quite well. Beat him 12 lengths, giving him a stone. Out on the Tear is a solid 115 horse all day long. He's a decent animal in that grade, and Calico kicked him to one side, giving him lumps of weight. Bridget Andrews takes over here. I think he's got outstanding credentials. He's not going to be a massive price, but I think, unlike a lot in this field, he's going to love this quick ground. So I'd be very confident that Calico can go one better than last time and actually get his plaudits this time as he deserves. And then the next best is down at Newbury in the 245. Weights are headed by Jess's Dream, aka Zanza, and Paint the Dream, both off marks of one.
Jessica's Dream.
Both had the weights off a mark of 158. Zanza is double declared. He's also declared up at Kelso. Given his form, I'd be amazed if he didn't run at Newbury, because his best form is all at this track. Paint the Dream's best form is at Newbury as well. But I'd be surprised if they can give lumps of weight to the Tom Lacey trained Sebastopol. He's got great form at this course as well. He won a grade 2 last time, beating Stage Star by 5 lengths, giving him £5. Now, I think it's reasonable to assume that Stage Star didn't give his full running, but Stage Star is a 152 rated horse. Sebastopol gets in here off 147. He's another horse that loves quick ground. Tom Lacey said after that win that he'd be kept back for a spring campaign and be kept busy. The mild concern is whether this is a springboard onto bigger targets down the line, but that doesn't tend to be Tom Lacey's MO. He tends to like to have them ready to run. He doesn't like to waste runs. Sebastopol's won a handicap off a mark of 144 over 2 miles at Chepstow a couple of seasons ago. He's definitely a better horse over this trip. He's got plenty of twos by his name, which does temper enthusiasm slightly, but he's a decent price against the two at the head of the weights, and I think he'll go very close.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting, that race. I've looked at that myself. Just a quick one. I was just thinking off the top of my head, the last time, I think there was someone tipped up a horse of Harry's, Dan Skelton's when Bridget Andrews took the ride. Was it Protectorate at Aintree when Bridget took the ride? And it was you, Ross, and he went and won with Bridget on board when they changed jockeys.
No, it wasn't me tipping Protectorate. I can say that with absolute certainty.
Something like that. I feel like something like that happened at some stage when Bridget Andrews came in for the ride, replaced Harry, and tipped up and won. So I feel like it can be quite a good omen sometimes. But anyway, maybe I'm imagining things. Thank you for that. The Great Wood Gold Cup that you mentioned, the 245 at Newbury on Saturday, of course, the race that I will be looking at, the beloved Zanza, absolute mad horse, and has got this ridiculous love affair for Newbury. Can he do it again at the track? Now off this career high mark of 158. Struggling to see. I mean, I'll be cursing myself. I know I will be, but I'll be delighted for them if he can do it again. But it's always when he is underestimated and overlooked that he goes and wins. Now I think you could probably get him about 11-4 to win this race, and what is highly competitive, as Ross said, with like Sebastopol. I do like Paint the Dream. Yes, he's got joint top weight as well. I just think he runs to a much more consistent high level, and he's my selection in the race. But I have also found another. I think he was my nap for Paint the Dream. Excuse me, he's my next best. My nap comes with Sausalito in the 341 at Lingfield. Now, TC might know this horse. I'm sure you do as well. He's running in, maybe it's his 3rd or 4th classified race, but he's not going to be eligible for another one if he bolts up again this time, because they finally worked out the key to this horse. He's by Frankel. He's he's clearly had his issues. I think he's had tendon leg issues throughout the course of his career, and putting the visor on has really, really helped him. And he bolted up at Chelmsford when I was there, whenever it was last week. He subsequently won at Lingfield yesterday, and then potentially it might be his last chance to run in a race like this. Billy Loughnane is back. He's got his £5 to take off this horse. Billy's been riding track work out in America, and he's back for his first couple of rides since that experience today and over the next few days. And like that, they've got him on board, and Sausalito is probably a good thing. Probably a very short price, but I think that he can keep up this roll of form. So that's my nap. And as I said, my next best is Paint the Dream, and what's going to be a great renewal of that race at Newbury. Okay, that's it for our weekend's action. A reminder that new SBK customers can get £10 in free bets by betting £10. T's and C's always apply. Please remember, and it's such an important time of year for this, to subscribe to whichever podcast channel you listen to, especially YouTube as well. Make sure to tune in on there. We've got a very, very special Cheltenham Festival preview podcast coming, but we've also got our specific Cheltenham podcasts that are already out for the championship divisions, for the novice hurdler, and for the novice chasers. So there's something for everyone as we creep ever closer to the Cheltenham Festival. It's under 2 weeks away now. So we will be back to record that podcast next week. So make sure to listen into all of our different pieces of content next week. A shout out to TC and your American tipping content, because that's always worth watching and listening to. And Ross Millar's handicapper, mover and shakers, which is going great guns. Brilliant strike rate. And you can find more about that on Twitter. So as ever, thanks to Ross, thanks to Tom, and we'll see you soon.